Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Woman blocks her sidewalk with a car, asks us to call the police. My neighbor blocked the sidewalk with her car during the last 2 snowstorms. This meant, 1, so she claims, she didn't have to shovel a path from her car to her house and instead was able to step directly on her shoveled sidewalk, which she pays someone to shovel, and could then walk to her front door. 2, she didn't need to shovel the sidewalk that her car blocked because no snow landed there, and 3, she didn't shovel the sidewalk between her car and the edge of her property, about 2 feet, because once people have to walk around her car in the street, who cares about the last couple of feet? She shoveled the sidewalk until the driver's side of the car, but not the passenger's side. So my wife politely knocked on her door, explained that forcing our kids to walk around her car meant they walked in the street and that wasn't safe, therefore could she please drive her car fully into her driveway, as required by law? The law doesn't permit someone to block a sidewalk. We didn't want to make this into a big deal, but as neighbors asked if she could be a normal human. The woman said no, and then claimed it wasn't safe for her to pull at the way into her driveway because that would force her to step in snow. My wife said if that was a concern she should shovel a path on her grass from her driveway to her front door. The woman then claimed she is not feeling well. My wife pointed out that she did this 2 months ago during the last snowstorm and that she goes to work daily. If she really was sick she'd be stuck in the house. Additionally, not feeling well doesn't preclude a person from parking in their own driveway or walking in snow. My wife said she would call the police non-emergency line. The neighbor says go ahead and she'd get a doctor's note. So we did. The police said they would drive over. We didn't see whether the police chatted with her or not. Either way, she got a ticket for blocking the sidewalk. She did shovel the 2 feet of sidewalk. I suspect the police did speak to her and reminded her that not shoveling a sidewalk is a fine from the building department, not the police, and if we were willing to call the police, we'd probably call the building department too. We had planned on it, but they were closed on the weekend when this happened. She now pulled further up, still partially blocking the sidewalk, but at least we don't need to walk around in the street. Of course, if she does this again, we won't be asking her politely to move the car and we'll call the police instead. Not that entertaining, but ask us to call the police, happy to. Edit, to avoid confusion and because I didn't explain well, the police deal with a car that is blocking a sidewalk. The building department deals with a sidewalk that isn't shoveled. We care more about blocking the sidewalk, although shoveling the snow would be nice too. She shoveled the remaining portion of the sidewalk after getting a ticket for blocking the sidewalk with her car. Next one is titled, Revenge for Cancelled Credit Card. After the recession in the 1980s I ended up bankrupt in the very early 90s. Now part of this was for several years, 7, you aren't supposed to have a credit card after that because of shitty credit. But it happened that my bank at the time was issuing cards en masse. They even issued some to cats. And I figured what the hell. Get the card, pay the bills and just not say anything. Forward a few years later and I had to take a business trip. My credit line wasn't enough to actually do it, so not thinking, I contacted the bank and asked for an increased limit. At that point, they actually ran a credit check and went, hang on, you shouldn't even have this card. Now, that was okay. I was about a year and a half away from that disappearing off my credit report, but it made the trip harder and I was kind of upset that after many years paying off in full every month they did that. So when the last bill came and they had cancelled the card, this was about 1995, I overpaid by $1, on purpose. I started receiving a monthly credit statement that they owed me $1 and the credit line was $0. Their system couldn't just send me the money, so it sat there stunned, generating a credit note and a statement every month. Every time I moved, I updated my address with them. So I would get the credit statement every month. The reason this all comes to mind is I recently received this month's credit statement. I have received them for over 25 years now, every month, without fail, and I live in another country. This is the best entertainment value I have ever got for $1. And the best revenge. Next one is titled, Unfair Admin Charge Paid Piecemeal. A number of years ago I visited a friend in Melbourne. En route to his house, I needed to travel on a highway that had auto toll booths. If you had the right dongle, it would debit the account you had set up with the private company when you drove beneath the toll sensors and cameras. As I was from interstate, I did not have the required dongle, so a photo was taken of the number plate of my car. I had a period of time, I think 48 hours, to contact the company to pay the toll. Although I intended to do so, I completely forgot. About a month to 6 weeks later at home in Sydney, I received the bill in the mail, about $3.50 for the toll, $10 fee for late payment and $11 in administrative fees. This is approximate, I don't remember the exact amounts. Now I know there is no person involved in this process, it is all done by computer, so the admin fee was just gouging. I figured if they were going to charge me for administrative stuff, I'd get them to work for it. So I be paid over the internet for $19, paying only half the admin fee. About 3 weeks later I received in the mail a bill for $5.50, I again be paid for half the amount, and again and again. And again. I finally paid in full when I received notice that additional late fees would be added to the account if I didn't, by which stage the debt was about $20, a postage stamp costs $50. Of course I don't know for sure, but I feel certain my case was eventually looked at by a human, so I figure I got them to work for their administrative fees after all. Next one is titled, When Conformity to Others Means You're Right Rather Than Following the Rules. Last summer I was given the extraordinary opportunity to attend Officer Candidate School in Quantico, VA for the USMC. I cannot speak to how boot camp is for the enlisted, as am not a prior, but at OCS there is a certain amount of leeway that is given for independent thinking due to the strong emphasis on leadership. Despite that, conformity is paramount, and if you look out of place then you are wrong and also a target, which brings us to our story. Disclaimer, there will be small tangents here, but they are important to give clarity to certain details and nuances that are unique to the US military, and the Marine Corps. The training program is 10 weeks. The daily routine did not change much for candidates. Wake up, PT, shower, go to class, etc. The entire time you are awake, the staff's job is to stress you out. Your only reprieve is class time, as you are expected to focus entirely on learning what is being taught to you. However, entering and leaving the hall is a cacophony of screaming and scurrying that never gets old. One tactic used to stress us out was to have our assault packs, backpacks with webbing on them that can be seen on periphery item carried by your local bro vet, packed with so much crap that opening and closing the bag was not a quick endeavor. Nor was removing and replacing select items. The bulkiest of which was a 100 ounces camel back, which was removed from the backpack and placed on the rear of your seat when entering the lesson hall, and replaced into your bag when leaving. You had what felt like 30 seconds to perform this task, both entering and leaving. I discovered early on that were I to not get caught, simply leaving the water source in my bag and sipping from the tube was a much more expedient and less stressful way of entering and leaving the hall, so that is what I did. Soon others from my platoon began to catch on, but the other platoons seemingly did not. Enter independent thinking. Our candidate platoon commanders within the company, they would develop plans and get them approved by our instructor staff for the day-to-day goings of the platoon, would meet and cross-reference their individual platoon's plans so that all ideas meshed and every platoon was in sync. This normally took place when everyone was supposed to be sleeping, because it required sneaking out and going up a deck or two to the rendezvous spot. At some point towards the end of our cycle, my method of handling the study hall was proposed to the other candidates. I'm assuming I was not there, I did not forward the idea. I simply was in the right place at the right time to see this plan unfold the next day. Cue our malicious compliance to adherence to conformity. Our day starts with the usual amount of screaming and scurrying. Virginia is hot and muggy. Our staff is calling members various names and informing our platoon that we would have been better users to society as abortions. All is right with the world as we march to the study hall, henceforth called Jekyll Hall. I enter the hall, remove my cover, hat, place my M16 into the armory, and scurry over to a seat to grab my textbook and begin screaming knowledge as we wait to start. I smirk, which is normally asking to have one-on-one PT time with your favorite staff member, but because of the pandemic, everyone is wearing masks, and say to myself, the girls, 1st platoon, left their water sources in their assault packs as well. Well, I was not the only person to notice. So too did a staff sergeant from 1st Platoon. Tangent and important distinction. In the Marine Corps, women train women and men train men. Segregation by sex is alive and well. And these women are the toughest and meanest individuals I have ever come across. To round this out, these particular sergeant instructors were doubly sadistic to their platoon and anyone else who was near them. To have one take notice of you or to question you was not something that was sought out. Back to the story. Staff Sergeant Rage calls the candidate platoon sergeant and candidate platoon commander over into the aisle. "What is wrong with your platoon?" she asks, exacerbated. The candidates do not immediately know what she is asking about. After a couple of more angry questions comes the winning ticket. Why is it that after all this time, your entire platoon sees fit to leave their camelbacks inside of their assault packs? Have we ever done that? Has that ever been okay? Why is that happening? Candidate: wish you weren't here. At this point, I am looking out of the corner of my eye and straining my ears to hear because I wanted no part of this staff sergeant's wrath and felt sorry for what was happening to this platoon commander. She responds, screams back, with an absolute unit of answers, which was one this staff sergeant never expected. "Good morning, Staff Sergeant. These candidates' water sources are in their assault packs because the other platoons in the company are doing the same thing." The SSGT thought she misheard. "What did you just say?" The candidate repeats herself in a more confident tone. It was at this point I saw one of the most comical looks appear on a staff member's face. The SSGT looks around and notices everyone else doing the exact same thing. She realized exactly what had been orchestrated, but also knew that lack of conformity kills. She would not punish the entire company even though we were all breaking the rules, and could not hold up the lesson as there was a strict schedule to keep. After a brief look of shock mixed with befuddlement, the SSGT regained her composure and stated, "Very well then," and simply left. After that moment, our company had one less thing to remove from our bags, and one less thing to replace in our bags. It's the little victories that matter. And I am certain that whoever that candidate was counted that moment as David toppling Goliath. Next one is titled, "Want to violate labor laws by keeping a ride open for a few more minutes?" Okay. I worked as a shift supervisor at a water park. Most of our staff was under 18 and can work no more than 8 hours per day in accordance with our state's laws. The shifts were 8:45 a.m. to 5:15 p.m. with an unpaid 30-minute lunch period. Pretty standard stuff. We had this lazy river that took 8 minutes for guests to ride and 8 employees to staff. Factoring in the time it took to adhere to closing safety protocols, it took roughly 10 to 12 minutes for employees to clock out after being relieved from their work position. Therefore, we closed the entrance gate to this ride 8 minutes prior to our 5 p.m. closing time every single day to ensure nobody got overtime. One summer, some park guests started complaining about the river closing at 4:52 instead of 5. Big Boss comes out and chews us out over it. I tried to explain the whole situation and that there needs to be a change to our park's operation and/or scheduling. Not my job if he wants to keep the attraction open until 5. I got the whole, "You're the supervisor, go figure something out" talk. Now, due to logistical reasons which I continued to explain to him, I didn't have enough adult employees to staff the ride. Despite this, he continued to insist that the water park closes at 5 p.m. sharp, not 4:52. As you wish, my guy. I still made an effort to get staff to hustle at the end of the day, but only for show. We had maybe 5 or 6 miners get a couple minutes of OT that day, which if held liable in court can carry a hefty fine of up to $10,000. This didn't go on for that long after, as we soon began receiving a handful of calls from local high schools threatening to revoke work permits. Next one is titled, "When Pigs Fly." So a little background before I get into the story. As a kid I very rarely had access to technology, which included anything from phones, this being around the time that Blackberries were the big thing, to TV. We didn't even own a TV, and even now we just have one of those box TVs with the green lines across, and especially video games. Now looking back, I'm honestly really glad my parents did that, as I instead turned to reading, and I honestly think that it's very positively impacted my life. I love to read and I do it really quickly as well, but that's not important to the story. Now after a ton of convincing and promises that I would follow the rules they set down, they finally let me get a Wii, and boy was I excited to get it. It's still one of my favorite consoles, and games like LEGO Star Wars, Super Smash Bros. Brawl and even Wii Sports and Mario Kart are and will be some of my personal favorites. Sadly, my parents were pretty strict with how much I got to play, and I had quickly became addicted, so any chance I had to play I would grab hold of. I got especially excited when friends came over, as my parents were often more lax during that time and much more willing to let me and my friend play uninterrupted. Now we had this one family who my parents were friends with and who had kids almost the same age as my sister and I, so they would often come over to our house as a family and they would talk and drink while us kids played around. So it happens that they all decide to come visit our house for a while, and so my friend and I get really hyped to play some Wii, but this time my mum said no, as I had recently been playing a lot. She told us that she wanted us to spend time doing other stuff for a little bit and we could play later, but this just led to us bothering her every 5 minutes asking to play the Wii. Now if you read the title, I'm sure you'll know what comes next. After like the 5th or 6th time of us asking, she finally decides to just tell us no by saying, "Tell you what, you can play the Wii when pigs fly." Now a lot of kids would just give up at this point and go try to find other stuff to do, but I was determined, so I pulled my friend into my room and told him my plan. I had gotten as a gift a while back one of those air-propelled rockets where you slide the rocket onto this tube that leads to this plastic box that you can like jump on or step on to shoot the air through the tube and make the rocket fly. I also had a ton of colored pencils and the creativity of a young child who won't take no for an answer. My friend and I take a sheet of paper and we spend like a good hour actually drawing a beautiful pig with these nice feathery wings, and then we colored it all pretty. We then cut it out and tapped it to the rocket, and we were ready for the next step of the plan. Now our parents were sitting in our kitchen and we have a sliding glass door that leads to the backyard, so I tell my friend to go around the house and stand in the back hidden next to the door with the rocket. We decide just to throw it by hand because it was easier to aim in a way that my mum could see it. I then walk into the kitchen and tell my mum that my friend and I found something really cool and she should look through the door to see it. My friend then tosses the rocket through the air and we get to see this winged beauty fly through the air. Honestly, it was not very aerodynamic as the rocket was sorta broken, as most cheap plastic things get when they are used by a child too many times, but you get the idea. Now I'm not sure whether my mum was impressed with the fact that I had managed to take her surefire way of saying no and actually make it a reality, or if she was just happy that we had spent our time and effort doing something that wasn't video games. But after laughing for a little bit and congratulating us, she went and got the Wii and we got to enjoy the rest of the day in the basement collecting studs. Next one is titled, "You Told Me to Stay and Then Get Mad for Doing What You Say?" I don't get it. The assistant manager at the store I work at doesn't like me. She finds any small thing I do wrong and yells at me for it, but lets everyone else get away with it. The last thing she yelled at me for was leaving the front unattended. I didn't, but because I wasn't physically at a register, that's why she yelled at me. Any of my cashiers can wander as far away as they want as long as they have visual on the registers and nobody will bat an eye, for reference. So this manager tells me I need to stay put when I'm up front if I am assigned to the register area. The next day she assigns me to work registers for closing. So I organize, clean, and stand in the front to not leave it unattended. So I got bored and the store was empty, so I started playing on my phone. She came up yelling at me, "What are you doing? There's work to do, boxes to unpack, aisles to organize. Why are you just standing around texting? Do something." I looked at her and calmly said, I'm making sure the front isn't left unattended. You told me you didn't want that happening. We don't have customers and I already cleaned the front, so I'm taking a break. She pointed at me like she wanted to yell at me, and then she turned and slammed a book on the counter and walked away. She can't say I wasn't doing what I was told to do. Next one is titled, "My Boss Voted Against Ranked Choice Voting." I decided to teach him why RCV matters in the only way I knew how. In November, one of the voting tickets in Massachusetts was to begin using ranked choice voting. The majority voted no. We were talking about it once at work and one of my supervisors voted no, saying we shouldn't get more than one choice. In true malicious compliance fashion, I decided I was gonna teach him a lesson as to why it matters that we have more than one choice when the opportunity came up. I'm the person that usually picks up lunch when we order out. And he ordered some empanadas from our local Hispanic convenience store. Empanadas that I did not bring. When he questioned me why I didn't bring him the empanadas, I told him that they didn't have the kind he liked. Beef, but there was other kinds like chicken, etc. As predicted, he's like, "Why didn't you bring any of the other ones?" I would have been okay with it. And I'm like, "Well, you said we shouldn't get more than one choice. What you want right there is a type of rank choice. So given that you don't think we should have more than one, I figured you wouldn't want any other than the one you wanted." And that's the story on how I got in trouble for the next week and a half at work, ha ha ha. Edit, by get in trouble, I mean he didn't speak to me for that week and a half. He didn't do anything to retaliate in any fashion aside from that. Last one is titled, "Assume I'm salaried when I'm hourly? Your mistake, not mine." I applied to a full-time opening at a company, but for reasons, they wanted to bring me in as a contractor for a while until a different position opened. I would be reporting to Joe in a department I didn't really care for, but it was alright as a temporary situation. Well, it turns out Joe was a reasonably nice person, but not such a great project manager. He staked his role at the company on our team delivering a certain major project on time. The problem was that a series of miscalculations meant we weren't able to even start working on it until halfway through the implementation phase. As schedules slipped and upper management expressed their disappointment, Joe became much less pleasant to be around. He yelled at good people for no reason, had a terrible attitude, and generally made life miserable for everyone in our workroom. Now, I was the sole contractor in that department full of salaried employees. Early on, Joe would all but push me out the door as my time card rolled over from 39.9 to 40.0 hours, as his budget had zero room for paying me for 41 hours a week. Even worse, that would pay the same as 41.5 hours, because I was subject to time and a half overtime rules. As crunch time turned into a death march, Joe made announcements like, "No one's going home until this is done," and scheduled to have breakfast and supper brought into the office every day. I asked Joe if this included me, and he said yes, of course, and he was surprised I had the nerve to ask. Okay then. It almost killed us. There was shouting and literally tears. We were all near breaking point, well, most of us. I was in a great mood. As rough and emotionally fraught as it was, we got the project done. We were heroes. And as Sunday dinner at our desks came and went, Joe thanked me in particular for my great attitude. "BNW, I really appreciate your hard work," with a smile during this tough time. That's when I reminded him, "Hey, I clocked an extra 61 hours of overtime this week. I'm thrilled I could help." Joe damn near had a stroke and I found myself standing outside waiting for my bus like 2 minutes later. He was upset, but couldn't really say anything because I had asked him if I had to stay and he explicitly told me that I did. It worked out great for everyone in the long term. Blown budget or not, Joe looked good for getting the project done. The CEO liked my can-do attitude and transferred me into a full-time dream job. And that paycheck, getting paid Silicon Valley hourly rates for 131.5 hours, 40 plus 61 times 1.5, bought a very nice vacation for my family. Thanks, Joe. I'm available to work all nighters anytime you want to pay for them. Thanks for listening.